start out my project one, I began with a general warm-up that consisted first off with a 5-minute cycle. The purpose of the cycle is to get your blood pumping, your heart rate up, and to just get your muscles overall warmed up for the activities that you're going to do throughout the rest of the workout. So to end off the 5 minutes, we now move on to the second part of the general warm-up, which is a dynamic leg swing, or otherwise known as a dynamic quad/hamstring stretch. This stretch is to activate the muscles that you'll be using. For me personally in the workout, it's the hamstrings and the quads that I used very much so throughout my lower body exercises. So you want to be sure you keep the motion going, that way you're not actually deactivating the muscles that you're about to use. And the last part of my general warm-up consisted of a minute-long session of high knees. You can see that I use my hands to gauge how high up I need to bring my leg. And once you get comfortable with that, you can remove your hands if you would like to. I chose the high knees as part of my general warm-up because I knew that I'd be doing a lot of squats and stretches and a lot of bending over. So this was my way of warming up my hip flexors and also my knee flexors at the same time, just to get those areas ready for any kind of weight bearing or stress that we will be causing throughout the workout. So then we move into the first part of the specific warm-up. I chose a single set 20 reps of mountain climbers because I knew that I'd be doing a lot of lunges as well, and this was a way to warm up my hips and knees still while also engaging my core and my upper body. So once I got done with these, I moved on to the second segment of the specific warm-up, which was 25 sit-ups. You definitely need someone to stand on your toes so that you're able to stabilize your lower body, and that way you're able to fully crunch in the full range of motion. You can see here I'm going above my knees, but if you are not as advanced or fit, you can definitely just touch the middle part of your thigh and do the sit-ups that way. It's also important to note that you don't want to lie flat between each sit-up. You really just want to let the bottom of your shoulder blades touch the mat before coming back up. This is important so that you can keep the core engaged throughout the whole set. So finishing that, we move into the last part of the specific warm-up. I chose some forward and backward arm circles. You can do as many as you feel that's necessary. I chose to do 15 forward, 15 backward because I don't have any shoulder impingements of any kind. But this is important if you're going to be doing any type of bench pressing or lifting, or really anything that you're going to be putting a lot of stress in the shoulder girdle. So that concludes the end of our warm-up. We now move into the first part of the main program, which is the bodyweight calisthenics. For upper body, I chose push-ups. You can see here that I'm doing some standard push-ups where my hands are placed shoulder width apart. I personally don't have the greatest wrists in this position. I do feel a bit of discomfort that kind of affects my form, so I did decide to just go ahead and do them on my fists. For the second part, I did some wide push-ups, another set of 10. These I was able to do on my hands, so I did so, and you can just kind of gauge it to your own personal feeling. And then for the last part, I just did some diamond push-ups where my hands were in a much more narrow position, and this really makes it all in the triceps. So these are the different variations that I chose for push-ups. You can kind of gauge how many you're able to do or which positions work best for you. So finishing that, we move on to the lower bodyweight calisthenics. For this, I chose some squats. So for the first set, I did standard squats, feet hip width apart, and then you're just trying to aim for that 90-degree angle at the knee. And for the second variation of my squats, I did a more narrow foot position. This made me feel it a lot more in the hamstrings and the glutes because it causes you to have a lot less balance throughout the squats. So it's pretty key that you have great form during this in order to not injure yourself or get any type of muscle cramping or fatigue. So finishing that, we move into the last variation of the squats. I chose a wide stance squat for my last variation because it is a much easier foot position to actually do more squats. Compared to the narrow foot position, it gives you a lot better balance, and so you're able to maybe go a little bit deeper into the squat and just get an overall stronger contraction and eccentric contraction as well. That concludes bodyweight calisthenics, and then next we're moving on to Swiss ball exercises. For my upper body exercise, I chose a dumbbell fly on Swiss. You can see here I'm just doing a standard body ball fly where my back is fully on the Swiss ball, and I'm trying my best to not let my arms hyperextend between reps. So concluding with that, we moved on to the incline body ball fly. This position will definitely engage the core and the chest a lot more rather than the standard where it's really all shoulder. So you can see that I'm just trying to hold myself up while moving the dumbbells in front and to the sides. And moving on to the last variation of the Swiss ball exercises for upper body, I chose reverse body ball fly, which is where you're on your stomach versus being on your back. You do want to keep your feet together, as you can see I adjusted. And this position is going to engage those shoulder blades and postural muscles a lot more rather than being on your back. So it's a different area for a different use. So moving on to the lower body Swiss ball exercises, I chose a bridging with feet on Swiss. You can see here this is just the standard bridge with feet on Swiss. I chose to do a set of 10 with 1 to 2 second holds. You just want to aim to get your spine aligned as you bring your hips up. And of course using your hands to the side to stabilize your body. And moving on from that, the second variation was bridging with one leg balance on Swiss. This is obviously going to be a lot harder to do because only one half of your body is in contact with the ball. So it's going to bring in a couple other muscles in order to get those hips up and that spine straight. And just with any other exercise where there is a left to right concept, you always want to even yourself out. So you can see here, I'm just doing the other side, same motion, same form, same goal. And for the last variation of my bridging on the Swiss ball, I chose to do a bridging with a subsequent hamstring curl. So you can see here, I'm kind of breaking it up into 4 steps just to make it easier. So you bring your hips up, you curl back out, and back down. This is kind of how I direct people to do it at the clinic that I work at also, because you know, it just seems like a weird movement when you've never done it before. But also you want to note that you want to get your hamstrings to curl to that 90-degree knee angle, and you'll definitely feel it back there in the lower back and all of that. So it's important that you dig your heels into the ball, your hands into the sides of you, and the shoulders into the ground in order to alleviate any type of pressure that might be happening on the lower back while you bring those hips up. Moving on to the next modality, I had some resistance training exercises using a barbell. You can see here for the upper body exercise, I chose to do a bench press. The first variation was a standard grip. You can see that it's just slightly outside of my shoulder width. And you want to go all the way down till the bar touches your chest. Moving on to the second variation, I chose to do a close grip bench press. This is definitely going to make it a lot more in the forearms and triceps rather than the standard grip where it's really a lot of chest and shoulder. So this one is a bit more advanced if those areas of your arms aren't as strong. And then the last variation I chose for the bench press was the wide grip bench press. This will definitely make it a lot more middle and lower pectoralis major or chest muscles. It's also going to be a lot harder on the shoulder versus the close grip. So this one is kind of an intermediate difficulty depending on how strong you are in those areas. And moving on to the lower body barbell exercises, I chose to do a deadlift. This first variation is just a standard deadlift. Your grip is shoulder width apart, your feet are hip width apart, and you're just squatting and straightening yourself out to bring that bar to your hips. So finishing that, we move into the second variation of the deadlift. I chose to do a wide stance deadlift with a switch grip, where you can see one of my fists is facing me and the other is facing in front of me. This just kind of eliminates any unwanted weaving in the bar as you're going up and down. And you can see that it's still a standard grip because it's still shoulder width. And moving on into the last variation of the deadlift, I chose to do a standard stance deadlift with a wide grip. So you can see that my feet are back to the hip width and my hands are placed at a much wider grip. ends off the barbell exercise modality. Now we moved into a rubber band exercise. You can see here that I chose some resistance band pull-aparts. For the first one, I'm just doing a standard pull-apart where you want to have your arms fully extended and you're stretching the band until it touches your chest. And just a note, another way you could vary this specific variation would be to grab both sides of the band. That would definitely make it a little bit harder. Moving on into the second variation, I chose to do a crossbody pull apart. So for the first side, you just want to stay on the same side. You can vary, go back and forth, but I just chose to do it one side at a time. So it's the same thing, arms fully extended, elbows locked, and you're just stretching that band apart until it touches your torso. And once I got done with that other side, I just went ahead and started doing the other side right away. I felt like I could just handle that. It's not a very tough exercise for me, so it's up to you whether or not you want to take a break in between. But just make sure that you always even out. You don't want to just work out one side in anything that you do in the gym. So finishing that variation, I moved into the third one, which was an overhead pull apart. The same thing with the standard, you can grab both sides of the band or you can grab one and let the other dangle behind you. But here you want to just have your arms fully extended, elbows locked, and you're stretching the band until you feel it on your shoulder blades behind you. So kind of like you're making a T with your arms against that resistance. You're gonna feel it a lot in the wrist and in the triceps. So finishing up the upper body resistance band workouts, I moved on to the lower body, which you can see here. I decided to do some squats with the resistance band. The first variation is just a standard squat with the band behind your back. finishing up that first variation, I moved into the second one where I had the band in the front rather than behind. I did have to kind of wrap it around my shoulders just to keep it from rolling forward. It just felt like a stronger resistance rather than just holding it in my hands. But of course, you can just gauge it to your own personal liking. Finishing up with that, I left off with a third variation where I had the band overhead. So I wanted to show you from a different point of view so you could see that I'm trying my best to keep my arms straight and going down as far as I can. With this one, I did have some trouble reaching that 90 degree just because it felt like the band was adding a lot of weight. So, you know, just do it as best as you can. So this concludes the resistance band modality. Then we move into the TRX modality. For the upper body, I chose to do some TRX rows. So for the first variation, I just did an underhand position. And you can see here that my feet are a good ways out in front of me to provide that angle where I'm pulling myself up. A way that you can vary this variation or any of them really is to have your feet farther out in front of you. Unfortunately, I was not able to do that just because the floor was pretty slippery and there wasn't really any kind of grip mat that I could use. And so yeah, I mean, bringing your feet forward would definitely make any variation of this more difficult. That concludes the first variation, and I moved on to the second, which I chose to do a neutral grip this time, where my hands are facing each other rather than the ceiling. And it's a good note that you don't really want to let your elbows pass your sides during any kind of row, so you can see that I'm trying to get that stick point where I go back, out, because you don't want to shear that biceps tendon. And then again, I couldn't really get a deeper angle on this, so I had to just go with what I had. But I did still feel this one in my forearms quite a bit, just by trying to keep that TRX cable resisted. on from that into the third variation, I chose a overhand position, grip position. This definitely made me feel it a lot more in my wrists and in my triceps. And I wanted to make sure that my elbows weren't out to not have it look like a high row. This is just a regular row. So I did my best to try to stick that position there and keep that form. So finishing off with that, I moved on to the lower body TRX exercise, which I chose to do a suspended lunge with medicine ball. So for the first variation, it was a suspended TRX lunge with the medicine ball placed at my chest. So first off, I did my left leg, going down all the weight on there. And this exercise was very surprising to me. I didn't expect it to be so hard to balance compared to like when you do a regular lunge. So you'll probably see me hopping around a little bit, just because it was really challenging to those muscles that keep your body upright. But I think I did pretty okay. It was kind of harder to keep my knee from going past my foot like you want to do in a normal lunge. Good form on a normal lunge, you don't really want your knee to pass your foot. But you know, in this type of position, it's kind of hard to stop that from happening, because you also have to have your foot more in the center of your body versus like at the hip width. So you know, this one I think is pretty okay that the knee goes past. Yeah, there I go, hopping around again. But yeah, this one felt pretty good. And so I did the other side also just to even it out. Yeah, so in my experience doing this exercise, I can see that it's probably pretty easy to injure yourself. So I was just taking a second to really make sure that I had my balance there and I was conducting good form. Because, you know, when your foot's hanging up behind you, you can kind of just get twisted around or risk, you know, falling in some kind of way. So I really just try to take my time with these ones so that I can make sure I was doing it in the proper form. So that finishes my first variation. For the second variation, I decided to have the medicine ball over my head. So this is obviously a different weight bearing type of sensation. The weight is above me, so I really had to focus on keeping those arms straight and not letting it come down on my head, as my legs are working hard to perform those lunges. I'm just doing the other side. Again, just really want to take your time making sure you have good form throughout this movement, because it's not in any way natural to everyday type of motions. And it's probably going to be pretty challenging to anyone like myself who doesn't have the best balance. So this is really challenging those muscles to keep that stability in the whole center of gravity going throughout your torso and your legs. So that finishes the second variation, and for the third, I chose to do the TRX suspended lunge with the medicine ball extended out in front of me. I did have to choose a lighter ball for this one just because I was having a lot of issues balancing with the heavier ball, and I didn't want to risk any type of impingement or injury, so I did decide to grab the lightest one just so I could really focus on that range of motion and get that down first. So that's definitely recommended for anyone that's not as advanced with the balance or doing this type of motion with the TRX. It's definitely a difficult exercise. So here you'll see I'm just doing my other side, and I was able to do it luckily without too much fatigue in my legs, but you'll probably see that I do have a bit of shakiness, this being the last set of these exercises. So I'm finishing with that. We move into the last modality. I chose some medicine ball exercises. I decided for the upper body to do a medicine ball press. So you see here I'm doing an overhead medicine ball press. I decided not to do a rep count on these, rather I timed myself. So I did 2 minutes on each one of the variations, and I think that worked out pretty well for me, but of course you can just gauge it to your own ability and exercise experience. Finishing off that overhead press, I moved into the second variation, which was a crossbody medicine ball press. Again, I just did it for 2 minutes on either side, so 4 minutes total. And I really liked this one because it honestly challenges every part of the upper body. It challenges your wrists to keep that ball in between your hands, your elbows to keep them kind of locked as best you can throughout the movement, your shoulders because they're trying to pull that weight up and above you, your chest for the same reason, and your core really. So this one felt pretty good to do this one. So I finished up that left side and moved on to the right side for the next 2 minutes. So moving on to the last variation, I did a forward medicine ball press, which was very challenging to the chest muscles and the wrist muscles. Again, just trying to squeeze that ball the entire movement and the entire set. But I still liked these ones. You know, it's fun working out the chest, especially with such an easy type of motion. You know, you're not having to bear a lot of weight, but you're still engaging those muscles quite a bit. So moving on into the last segment of the main program, I chose to do some lower body lunges with the medicine ball. So you can see here, I'm just alternating between sides, doing a standard lunge, and just trying my best to not let that knee pass my foot. So for the second variation of the lunges with the medicine ball, I did some static lunges with medicine ball rotations. So again, I'm just alternating between sides and rotating the medicine ball to the side of my leg that is out in front. And moving on from that, I did the last variation, which was a stationary lateral lunge with the medicine ball. So you can see here, I'm just holding the ball to my chest the whole time, alternating between the sides out to the side to get a stretch on that inner thigh and the quad of the leg that is bending. These felt pretty good, you know, and you can decide what weight of medicine ball you want to use based on your own personal ability to recruit those fibers. For me, I just chose a nice medium weight so I could really just make sure I wasn't gonna fatigue or cramp up those muscles, because I personally don't use those muscles as much, so I wanted to make sure I was exercising them without hurting them. And so that's a very important thing to do if you're a beginner athlete or anybody beginning to work out for the first time in a long time. The adductor muscles, which are the muscles on the inner side of the thigh, are muscles that we don't use particularly a lot. So this exercise specifically will really engage those muscles. And if they're not used to that, you know, you could risk injuring yourself. So it's very important that you take it slow and have a good form and just don't overwork yourself. So with the last rep of that, I finished the main program of my exercise plan and moved into the cool down. For the first part of my cool down segment, I chose to do a lying spinal twist. So you can see I have my feet together, my hands out to the side to stabilize my body, and I'm just slowly bringing down my knees to the floor until I feel a stretch in my lower back and my glute area. So this one I really was looking forward to the whole time because of a lot of the movements that I was doing, like the squats and the deadlifts and, everything, like even the lunges. I was probably really putting a lot of pressure and stress on my lower back. So this one felt really good. I could tell that my back really needed that. And so I knew that it would be a good first step to the cool down. And here I'm just doing the other side. So again, slowly bringing the knees down to the floor till you feel the stretch. For you at home, you want to make sure you're not quickly doing any herky-jerky movements with this. It's a cool down. It's not supposed to be a dynamic stretch. It's a static stretch. So slowly moving into the stretch, not feeling any pain. If you do feel pain, don't stretch into it that far. So finishing up with that, I moved into the second part of my cool down, which I chose to do a lunge stretch with an overhead stretch. I did a 30-second hold on either side, so it was a minute total. And you can see that I'm just trying to keep that position, really reaching up to the ceiling to stretch out the back and keeping that lunge position to give those muscles a invigorating yet easing stretch. So then I moved on to the last part of my cool down where I chose a simple stationary static arm across stretch. So I'm just using my left arm to kind of pull my right arm towards the side of me and also kind of pulling it into my chest to really stretch out the shoulder muscles there, the triceps, the muscles in the forearm and the wrist, since I did have some discomfort in my wrist throughout the exercises. So lastly, I just finished off by doing the other side. Again, I'm just pulling that arm towards my chest while also reaching out in the extension. And this was a nice cool down stretch because of all the benching that I did and the push-ups and everything that was challenging my triceps. So that's why I wanted to end it off with this one. So that concludes my workout plan. I felt like this was a good plan for anyone who's kind of beginner or intermediate. I'm not one to work out all the time every week, so this was a nice, easy workout for me and for anybody on that same level of difficulty. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed and you can see me finish out this minute-long static stretch here. and bye.